Welcome to the west coast of Australia, 2134, a country that has been ravaged by World War III and rebuilt on corruption. The rich live big, enjoying the view from the top while the rest of us fight to scrape out a living. The only hope many of us have is to con or carve our way up the ladder. Fortune favours the bold, after all. And to add to the chaos, advanced body tech, body augmentations and cybernetics have changed society forever and led to huge rises in crime and violence. And so the hunters have been established, a halfway point between federal police and bounty hunters. The hunters work outside the law and put their lives on the line for their country, for their gods, and for money. In these cities, you do what you can to stay alive. It's all you can do. A moonless night overlooked the south coast of Australia as the maglev train sped through the red desert, and I made my way back home. Not that you could see much of the red sands and the spin effects during a night like this. The bright white LEDs and the deeper blues of the neon lights along the carriage ceiling caused a mirror effect against the glass and the black beyond. I caught my own reflection. My shoulder-length brown hair hung free and my white forelock dangled to one side of my face, giving my already tired expression a macabre visage. My clothes creased and my jacket over one shoulder, I looked exhausted. I made my way along the carriage. I hadn't gone to my seat when I first set off from Adelaide. I had in fact gone to the bar. Funerals will have that effect on you. But a few shitty beers and a bag of peanuts later, and I decided to find my seat. I stepped over bags and pressed past the odd passenger who was moving about. Thankfully, this was a private train, Terra Coastal Transit, that meant no meth addicts and none of that oh-so-charming smell of vomit to accompany me on my journey. It wasn't so upper class that I had a private room, though. I found my seat and double-checked what was listed on the ticket. Car 3, 22B, CDR Ulf Whitlock. The 22B was printed in block letters on the top of the vinyl-covered headrest. I stowed my bag overhead, then slid into a chair across from a huge orc. He was dressed in a sleeveless leather vest over a white button-up shirt, with sleeves rolled all the way up, his bare arms crossed over his chest. Those arms raised my eyebrows slightly. Almar Tech arms, carbon fibre with titanium weave, and who knows what was hidden inside them. Almar were military contractors though, so I assumed whatever upgrades he had, they were some serious shit. They'd even been painted a muddy green to match his skin, clan tattoos airbrushed onto the panels. A few cranial implants were obvious on his bald head, and the juxtaposition to all this was a pink sleeping mask pulled down over his eyes. To top it off, scrawled on a scrap of paper balanced on his chest, were the words, "We'll wait for food." I smiled a little. I liked orcs, generally. You knew where you stood with an orc, and it was either as a friend or an enemy. You found out pretty quick in my experience. I yawned and looked out the train window at the dim shadows of the landscape zipping past. It could be worse, I could be flying. I didn't like flying, not anymore, not if I could help it. But a train, what could go wrong on a train? I settled back into my seat and turned on a stream of a local newscast halfway through a report on a major security breach at Merlin Tech. The rep being interviewed was denying that there was anything to worry about amidst rumours of new tech being stolen. I swapped through the channels until I found a lo-fi music broadcast. I sat enjoying the music and the gentle rocking of the train as it was buffeted by the southerly winds. The lack of conversation from anyone in my immediate area was most welcome. This was a night trip, in the middle of the week, across state lines. There wasn't too many people on board really, not what you'd call crowded in any case. Maybe 1 in 3 seats taken. Most were middle-class elves and humans, the odd orc or a half-blood. No goblins though that I'd seen. Little ferrets didn't usually make it above the gutter in my experience, but it did happen. I began to nod off to sleep and my communicator started to beep. I rubbed my eyes and sat up, as though whoever was calling could actually see me. Fear's face in a little circle appeared overlaid on my vision as I answered the call. My sister's form blurred as I tried to make a solid connection. She looked tired too. She always did around this time of the month. Lycanthropy is a bitch to deal with, even with inhibitors. Hey, was all she said, sitting cross-legged and nursing a large cup of what I knew to be coffee. Her oversized pajamas bunched around her skinny form. A network of tattoos spiraled up her arms and neck, disappearing under her top. Her short, scruffy hair pressed flat on top from her headphones. Hey, I responded quietly, careful not to wake the orc opposite me. How was Dad's funeral? I shrugged. It was small, what we expected. She nodded and sipped her coffee. Sorry I couldn't be there. It's okay, I whispered. Everyone understood. Bad timing for the old fool to die. Fear chuckled. He always had bad timing. How do you think he got 6 kids? It was my turn to chuckle. Old beggar couldn't even pull out of a driveway. She snorted as she laughed. Fear, or Sophia, was my twin sister, though you wouldn't know it from looking. Despite being twins, we've got different rates of aging. Fear will look 18 until she's about 60, and I already looked my near 40 years of age. I'll probably slow down in aging in the next few years though. Most half-elves live a good couple of 100 years, but aging works differently for all of us. Something about DNA of humans mixing with elves is unstable. Otherwise, I'm pretty nondescript for a half-elf. Fear and I both have the pointy ears and the lean build, but that's about it. I notice you're still awake, I asked, turning the statement into a question. She nodded and sipped the coffee again. It's bad tonight, she said, not making eye contact. I'll just lock myself in, just in case. I nodded. Fair call. Better not risk another incident like... She held up a hand, cutting me off. Yeah, don't remind me. It is ironic that our parents named me Ulf just for Fear to be the one infected with lycanthropy as a teenager. She had contracted the virus during an attack on us while we were camping, and there was no known cure. She did have all the traditional magic inked on her, and an inhibitor chip that was the highest grade, government supplied. A combination of old magic and new biotech, but at night she always felt the urge to change, regardless. She could hold it off, but it was hard. For Sophia, the urge was always there, deep inside, every day of her life. The virus had infected her deeply. UV light helped suppress the change, and she slept with them on even during the day. But really, she was a prisoner in her own body. There was silence for a full minute as I let her enjoy the coffee. So, why did you call? I asked, eventually, breaking the silence. She reached out to a console just outside my view, and I heard her typing. There's a ping on a mark in your area, if you're interested. In my area? I'm moving at hundreds of kilometers an hour. My area's a train. She shrugged. Yeah, well, a fake ID that's been associated with one Eric Thompson was used to board the train at your last stop. I really wasn't in the mood to work, but I couldn't help my curiosity. Sounds careless of him. Got a file? I asked. There was some more typing. The orc across from me let out a snore as he shifted positions, the sheet of paper slipping away. I reached across and propped it back up as the file came through. I scrolled the limited information. He's a B-grade hacker. Some work with the biker gangs, the odd group job with the overseas mobs. Oh, and look, some light extortion. There's nothing special here, Fear. Let the cops handle it. Wait. I paused. He's a goddamn gnome. Yep. What's a gnome doing working with these kinds of people? Who knows? She yawned. But he's on the train with you, and I guarantee you could take him. She was probably right, and it was technically my job. As a hunter, I was meant to take jobs if they presented themselves. You'll have him sorted in no time. Look how many cranial upgrades this guy's got. He's a prime target for you. I scrolled the file a second time. There was a picture, mid-40s or so, blonde with glasses and a few tattoos. I'll go for a walk later, see if I can find him, but I'm not busting my ass. We could use the money. She left that comment hanging awkwardly in the air. I'll check it out, I reassured her. Cool. Good night. She mimed a fist bump and hung up. Good night, I said to the disconnected symbol floating in my vision. I considered our impending lack of cash. Fear was right. We needed the money. But there was no stops between us and Perth. The gnome could wait. I closed my eyes and leant back in my seat, hoping some sleep would overtake me in the meantime. I didn't know how long I'd been asleep, but I was woken as the train jerked hard and I was flung forward, cracking my head on the plastic tabletop. I looked up at the orc, rubbing my forehead. He was still asleep, the paper lost somewhere under the table from the jolt. Emergency lighting flickered on as the white LEDs went out and the blue neons switched to red. The landscape outside became less of a blur as the train slowed to an almost full stop. People all around me were panicking, questioning each other, and generally getting nowhere. I paused momentarily, questioning if I should hack the system to find out what the train's status was, and quickly decided to make it my business. Sitting back in my seat, my eyes lost focus on the real world as I brought up a menu and started hunting for a way into the system. Text scrolled past my eyes, letters and numbers, hieroglyphics, the last being my own private code. I have a few decent upgrades, not available to the general public. As I'm technically a federal operative, they let me pull access on certain systems. Having said that, I would have been able to make my way in anyway. This was just easier. I got into the train's mainframe to find the pilot AI locked out and an independent shutdown program in play. All external communications had been blocked. No calling for help then. The AI was too basic to do anything to retaliate, and on top of that, the anti-violence programs were offline. Programs designed specifically to stop the use of smart weapons and aggressive body tech. I could take it out. It would take time, and then I could take control of the train. But then whoever did it would know I was here. I backed out of the mainframe and started to scroll through the surveillance cameras. Some of them were dead, the ones on the outside of the train mainly. That confirmed a suspicion I had. This was a hijacking. The ones on the inside were live though, so whoever was behind this was looking for something, or someone. There was lots of action in the passenger cars, people moving about, staff confused and trying to settle the chaos. Then as I flicked through a camera I saw him, Eric Thompson, looking rather more worried and confused than everyone else. He looked ready to run, but he didn't have anywhere to run to. Maybe I wasn't the only one alerted to his train hopping. "What have you been up to?" I muttered, but before the words had even left my mouth, my system threw up an alert. Someone knew I was here. I automatically began running countermeasures, my own hieroglyphic code quickly overtaking the regular one as I blocked the other hacker. There was a glitch on my visuals and I lost the camera feed. I started up a burn program and left it to run and hunt out the other hacker. It probably wouldn't make it through the other hacker's firewalls without my guidance, but I had other problems. Besides, I just needed to keep them busy. My vision came back into focus as I logged out, leaving my own firewalls up and the hunter burn program running in the background. I got up from my seat and started to push my way through other passengers, making my way down the line, heading to the car I'd seen Eric in. His stupid face imprinted on my vision. Last time I saw him, he was in the carriage 2 down from me. I kicked bags out of the way and stepped over fallen luggage to get to an adjoining door. A security officer was standing on this side of it. He held up a hand. "Please go back to your seat, sir." I pulled out my badge. Federal Hunter Whitlock, 69467. I'm after a suspect that may be the cause of all of this. I waved a hand at the ceiling, as if I needed to point out the current state of the train. He looked at my badge, and the indecision on his face quickly gave way to, "I'm not paid enough to argue with you." "Fine," he sighed, and waved his access card across the locked door. It slid open and I pushed past him. There was a sort of ante-room between the 2 train cars, with a door to where the platform usually would be. The next door had no guard. They probably only had enough for 1 per carriage. I stepped into the next carriage, and it was the same mix of pandemonium. It took me longer than I would have liked to get to the other end. Another security officer stood there, a half-elf like me, his blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, his expression looking smug for some reason. Before I could say anything, he held up a hand. "Bugger off back to your seat." My hand moved to pull out my badge, and his dropped to his taser. I looked down at the motion, expecting him to repeat himself. My hand froze inside my jacket as I noticed the back of his hand. It was covered in gang rune tattoos. In a split second, I brought up a menu and began to run an ID check on him. As though he knew what I was doing, he pulled his weapon from its holster and unloaded 3 rounds into my chest. Not a standard issue taser, a small caliber pistol. I threw myself behind the dividing wall for the luggage, the small rounds not managing to make it past my subdermal ballistic armor, but ruining a perfectly good shirt. I wouldn't be much of a hunter if I wasn't prepared for this kind of shit though. Passengers screamed and ran for the end of the carriage. The fake security guard fired another 3 rounds into the dividing wall. "Way to blow your cover, mate," I said, buying time. I reached out with a wireless connection, like extending my touch through thin air. Making a connection in a heartbeat, I started to crack his security. His firewalls were as useful as a wet paper bag. 2 more rounds shot off, and then he screamed. I sent a spike of power through his system and temporarily fried his optics. Moving fast, I came out from behind the wall, swinging my right hand. It split in two as a 10-inch punch dagger emerged from my wrist just in time to go through his right shoulder, pinning him to the door. His arm's biotech jolted as he tried to regain control of the motors I'd just severed. Lubricant and blood gushed from the wound. I ripped down, severed as much as I could, the blade exiting from his armpit. His arm hung limp, barely connected. His optics came back online as if awakened by the pain, and he screamed. "Hi," I said, barely an inch away, grinning into his face. "Oh, yourself," he retorted through gritted teeth. There was a buzzing sound. I looked down, and the knee on his right leg began to glow from beneath the fabric. I jumped backwards as a bolt of energy erupted from under the blue slacks. It tore through the roof above us, and he collapsed back into the door. The energy weapon was too powerful for his system. His body looked like he was having a seizure, and he was going into shock. I steadied myself against the wall as the train rocked and jolted again from the blast. All of a sudden, I felt pain in my neck. Touching the spot, my fingers came away bloody. One of the bullets had clipped some unprotected flesh. Not a serious wound. I didn't have a med kit, and I didn't really have any time. I could see other figures running through the crowd in the carriage ahead of me. One orc and one human, both clearly gang members and looking pissed. I stole the access card off the idiot on the floor as his body convulsed. Stepping over him, I moved to the door, then thought better of it. I retracted my punch dagger and reached down into my pants pocket. There was a soft hiss. The pocket was cut out so I could touch my leg. I'd given a lot of my body over to biotech, and my thighs segmented as it opened a compartment in my leg to let me draw out my own firearm. I moved back behind the wall. My hieroglyphics rolled over my vision as I jammed the door and then started in on the 2 gang enforcers trying to open it from the other side. The orc's profile came up first. Not much in the way of cybernetics, but enough for me to do some damage. And a blessing that his security software was absolute trash. Whoever had hired these guys didn't expect them to need much in the way of cyber defense. They were purely muscle. I uploaded a burn program, and his scream confirmed that it had initiated. Peeking out from the wall, looking at the window and the door, I saw smoke rising up from what I presumed was his now lifeless body. The human gave up on trying to open the door and shot the lock. I rolled my eyes. Moron, I've been watching too many movies. I hit send on the burn program a second time as I broke through his firewall and heard the "No, no, 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 no" come back just in time before the scream. He realized what was happening too late. The door slid open as I waved the card over it, the smouldering bodies of the 2 gang members laying on the other side. Almost all the passengers had taken cover, a few poking their heads out, daring an inquisitive look. I stepped over the bodies. In an instant, a vice-like grip latched onto my leg. I looked down just in time to see the orc's face grinning up at me before several thousand volts coursed through my body. My whole body locked down, my cybernetic augmentation seizing up just as much as my living tissue. I tried to force myself to move, to do anything. My optics were throwing up alerts and system errors like crazy. Just needed one small motion. Just one. Smoke started to issue from my right arm's elbow joint as I forced movement into it. The joint bent and my finger tightened its grip. The shot went right through one eye and the orc's body slumped to the floor. I almost fell over, reaching out to brace myself on the door jamb. I unloaded 2 more rounds into the orc, just to be sure, then staggered onwards. I was weak, but I was picking up speed. Moving along the carriage, I tried to ignore the scared passengers, pushing them out of my way. To my surprise, my comm began to ring. It was Fia. I answered the call without slowing down. "Hello, welcome to Party Central." She was focused on something outside of my view. "Why the fuck are you in a comms black spot all of a sudden? I just managed to sneak in without being detected." I laid it out for her. She kept typing on her keyboard, watching her own screen. "Holy shit, Ulf, your body was almost fried. What happened?" Her link to my body had flagged her. Turns out I'm not the only one hunting our little friend. The sound of her fingers flying across the keyboard was in the background as I heard screams from the carriage ahead. "Ah, shit." "You go ahead, I'll try and regain the train from here. I'll keep an eye on the cameras too, try and follow you while I'm at it." "Try and get us moving again. I don't want any more drop-ins. And alert Terra Coastal. She nodded and put all her focus into her work. I minimized it to audio only. The door opened and people poured into the train car, running for their lives. When I finally got past them, I was met with the sight of Eric facing down 3 more enforcers. He was small, as per his race, maybe 3.5 foot, pointy ears and a scruffy short beard with no obvious cybernetic limbs. He was almost vibrating with nerves, his hand held out in front of him, holding a long, slender piece of metal. I squinted, not believing what I was seeing. "Fia, are you seeing this?" "What the hell?" I heard her exclaim just as a fireball erupted from the end of the wand. It rolled through the walkway of the carriage and slammed into the 3 gangsters as they tried to throw themselves into cover. Eric fell sideways and I rushed to catch him. He still gripped the wand tight. It smoked blue from the length of the shaft, the pale silvery metal covered in runes. I'd never seen a metal wand before. Eric looked up at me, his face ghostly and looking sick. "You're a goddamn idiot," I exclaimed as I helped him to his feet. "Did I get him?" I looked up as one of the 3, an elf with a now half-burnt face, got to his feet and raised an automatic shotgun. Yes and no. I dropped him into a seat, bringing up both my arms in front of me. My sleeves tore apart as twin ballistic shields erupted from my forearms. This shirt was definitely ruined. The shotgun went off. 6 rapid shots rocked my body and I felt the shrapnel ricochet off my legs. I heard him start to reload and I advanced. In the background, Fia shouted warnings into my ear. I ignored her and broke into a sprint. I reached him just as he raised the barrel and I pushed it aside, slamming my palm into his face. "My turn!" A halo of hieroglyphics appeared around his head in what looked like a hologram. His eyes rolled back. My vision switched from a clean view of the carriage and the carnage around me to refined heat signatures, blue and purple lines, numbers and symbols. This vision was based on electrical impulses. I could see wireless data streaming through the air in colourful signals. The walls were a collection of pulses and data. The victim in my hands a series of options laid out in glorious scrolling code, clay for me to mould. The temptation to use this power was so strong, to invade his mind and take him over. I could feel his consciousness pushing against mine, weak, pathetic. I could do so much more with this vessel. I could make him better. I could do better. I could be better. It was as easy as flicking a switch. Fia's voice, faint in my ears. "Don't do it, don't do it, don't give in." It pulled me back. I did only what I had to do. The code and the signals faded as I came back to everyone else's reality. I removed my hand from the thug's face and he collapsed to the floor, catatonic. "You're a fucking Cypher?" It was Eric. I turned to regard him, blood trickling from my nose, my eyes bloodshot. I could only imagine what I looked like to him. I stalked back down the hallway and grasped him by the collar, lifting him almost off his feet. He looked petrified. "And you don't know the first fucking thing about magic." "But you're a Cypher," he quavered. "What the hell are you doing here?" The door at the end of the carriage behind the 3 dead assailants slid open, and another 5 very armed and very dangerous gang members charged in, weapons raised. Some were toting firearms, some were sporting some basic but very effective melee augmentations. Same as them, apparently. "I'm sorry to interrupt," said Fia. She cleared her throat. "But there is a huge orc heading your way, and he looks pissed." There was a hiss from behind us, the door opening. I risked a look over my shoulder and saw the orc I'd been seated across from step inside, one arm raised, hand split in 2, a large barrel protruding from his wrist joint. "Don't nobody bloody move!" Well, shit. I lowered Eric back into the seat. This just got a hell of a lot worse. Thank you for listening to Cyphers Edge. Subscribe so as not to miss future episodes. Script and narration by J.J. Brandis. Music was provided by Kael McLeish. Copyright J.J. Brandis 2024.